In 2 days, it'll be Halloween, and we celebrate Halloween in lots of ways. People dress up in costumes, there's trick-or-treats. The television networks have been showing creepy, scary movies for a week at least now. There are all kinds of ways to celebrate Halloween. I've heard sermons preached against Halloween. I've never preached such a sermon in my life because mostly it's just a harmless, secular holiday, an excuse to eat more candy than you should be eating. And frankly, I just flat don't like Halloween. I don't like scary costumes. I don't like scary people. I'm almost 68 years old and I've never seen a horror movie. Never, ever, not one. I don't even watch the advertisements for horror movies. I change the channel immediately. And I've never been in a haunted house. Unless, of course, my own house is haunted. I do have a little box on my bedroom that says, "Remember, as far as anybody knows, we are a perfectly normal family." But by and large, no Halloween for this preacher. But I am a big fan of All Saints Day. The two kind of actually go together. One's October 31st, and the calendar of the church, All Saints Day is November the 1st. This is the Sunday closest to All Saints Day. So today we are celebrating All Saints Day. I'm celebrating it, and I hope you'll join me. I know I didn't ask your permission, but I'm asking your forgiveness if you think I should have asked you for your permission. You are Christians after all. So right here and now, we're going to celebrate All Saints Day. It's much more important than Halloween, but in some ways it's even scarier. Why scary? Because All Saints Day reminds us of the cosmic nature of our faith. We are connected with those who went before us and kept the faith even at the cost of their own lives. These are the people whom Jesus says, if you are faithful up to and including the point of death, those are the saints. We are connected by the saints who kept the faith and protected the vulnerable Christian community from the powers and principalities. All Saints Day is scary because it reminds us that the world is populated with beast kings like those we find crawling out of the Old Testament book of Daniel, and dragons crawling out of the book of Revelation. The saints are our resource for standing up to all the evil in the universe. God has produced the saints to be God's answer to the darkness that tries to conquer the universe. Now, we act like we don't believe that our faith has this cosmic dimension because we tend to be afraid of apocalyptic speculations, and we think that all of that stuff must belong to the Pentecostals and the fundamentalists and people like that. But we are making a huge mistake if we do not believe that our faith has within it a cosmic dimension. Now, we may have given that up and think that we have become too sophisticated for it, but I am sure that we are numbered among the millions of people who have flocked to every Star Wars movie, whether it's a prequel or a sequel, because Star Wars mythology is very simple and very biblical. There's light and there is darkness. There is the good and there is the evil. There is Luke Skywalker and there is Darth Vader. And don't forget the millions who have read and watched every single Harry Potter book and movie. There's even a resurrection in Harry Potter, for God's sake. I think that we flock to these because we are starved for stories like this. I'm going to venture just a little bit of a psychological analysis and say to you that I believe that we want to believe that there is always going to be a goodness that prevails against all odds. We need to have this hope that no matter how great an evil may befall us, there is goodness that will finally overcome. So putting aside all the crazy speculations that usually fuel interpretations of apocalyptic literature, I want to remind you that we're in the fight of our lives against the beast kings who fight for keeps because they know this is life or death. And we may shrug our shoulders. We may deny that it's true. You may decide that I'm absolutely nuts, but you will not be the first, and I am not deterred by it. If we deny it, it makes us easy pickings for the powers and the principalities. A people who are not rooted and grounded in the communion of saints will follow any old stick of a politician who promises them the moon. So today, we remember the saints because they're the ones who know how to have the courage to stand up to beast kings. And you can't make sense out of it if there's not this cosmic warfare going on around us. And isn't it just like God to go up against the beast and dragons with some people we have learned to call saints? Now, I'm not trying to shock you, but saints don't always look saintly, don't always act saintly, and don't always talk saintly. They don't always appear to be saintly. They may not even look like much. They are often the people that the high and the mighty will pass on the street without a glance. The saints are people that the rich and famous label nobody. But never be fooled by appearance. What the world calls nobody, God may call saint. Now there's a sense in which you already are a saint. It would be appropriate biblical interpretation for me to address you on Sunday morning as my brothers and sisters. It's written all over the New Testament. It's also appropriate biblical theology if I were to say to you every Sunday morning, welcome saints, this sermon is for the saints of God. Because saint, in one sense, is just another word for Christians. All Christians are saints. Now, I know that you have been taught to nod and lower your head and pretend to be humble and say, well, I'm certainly not a saint. Well, forget that. You may not be much of one, but you are. You are a saint. All God's people are saints. And from the body of saints, God produces some who have a vocation of deliberately standing against the powers and the principalities. Alan Gorganis, this wonderful short story that I've shared with you in our previous class, It Had Wings, has the best description of a saint that I think I've ever read. There's an older woman who's retired from selling formal clothes at a downtown department store. She lives in a little yellow house, and for some unknown reason, an angel has broken a wing and fallen in her backyard. And she nurses this angel back to health with warm milk. And when she discovers that when she shares her troubles, it's like vitamins to the angel, so she just pours out all her troubles until the angel gets his full strength back and flies away. And now she is staring into the sky to no one in particular, and she says, I'm here, right here, ready for more. And then Gorganis says, can you guess why this old woman's chin is lifted? Why should both her shoulders, usually quite bent, brace so square just now? She's guarding the world. Only nobody knows. That's a saint. You're doing your job when you stand your post. You're guarding the world. You're guarding the world against the Darth Vaders and the Voldemorts and the powers and the principalities. And you may not feel that you're doing much, and you may not be well known for it, but you are helping to guard the world. You are helping to keep the faith on behalf of goodness, and don't ever let anybody take that away from you. Don't let anybody make fun of your faith. And if someone does make fun of your faith and you need help, you call me. I'll come stand next to you. Okay? Is that a deal? And in the Old Testament reading for today, we have a pair of saints. Two women saints named Naomi and Ruth. Now, I think it's our usual habit to think of women as saints because of the number of times in churches across this land I have heard people walk up to a man, shake his hand, and introduce himself and look at his wife and say, she must be a saint. To be married to you. I can tell by your response that you've all heard it. You have to be a saint to be married to him. Ruth and Naomi are trying to survive in a man's world. And I'm going to tell you, you're grown people, that some of their actions would not be blessed by the American Baptist Women's Organization. But they are still saints. Look, this has never been a safe world for women. In chapter 2 of Ruth, Naomi warns Ruth when she goes out to the harvest to work in the field to stay close to the women of Boaz so that she will not be sexually assaulted. The world hasn't really changed that much, has it? We remember these women as saints because they survived the cosmic conflict attempting to wipe them from the face of the earth and the memory of the human race. They look so vulnerable, so powerless, so weak. They are reduced to working in the fields just to put food on the table. They've lost everything. Naomi has lost a husband and 2 sons. And now she's just trying to find a way to get to the end of this day so she can face another day. I just finished reading the memoir of the comedian Trevor Noah from South Africa. The book is entitled Born a Crime. It's about growing up as the son of a white man and the daughter of a black woman. And in South Africa, under apartheid, it was a crime to be a child of a mixed marriage. And the first 12 years of his life was spent either inside the house or behind walls because he could not be seen. Otherwise, his father would have been deported and his mother would have been beaten and thrown into jail. And he says in his memoir that sometimes you lose sight about what is and is not wrong, what is and is not illegal when you're just trying to stay alive and put food on the table. That's why when a homeless person tells you some wild, far-fetched tale, I want you to remember that it probably took them 10 years to perfect that lying story. Because they have a wisdom of the streets, that they have to do something to try to stay alive and eat their next meal. And that's where Naomi and Ruth find themselves. They stand there against the beast kings. They are not armed with lightsabers and Jedi powers. They are weak but never discount the power of saints. They are easily overlooked. Our own Sunday school education should have taught us never to underestimate those who are on the Lord's side. We've been taught to always take up for the underdog, and in Sunday school the reason we were taught that is because we know about David, don't we? Don't you know about David and Goliath? David who went out to face the giant with a slingshot and a bag with 4 stones. I heard a preacher once say, you know what happened to Goliath? He never looked at that bag and said, I wonder what the kids got in the bag. Don't ever underestimate the people that God has sent forth with 4 stones in a bag. So see Naomi and Ruth bravely take on the cosmic forces aligned against them. If you read the whole book and you're paying attention, you will see that they use all the craftiness, ingenuity, and sexiness they can muster to survive. Ruth went out in the field and she caught the eye of Boaz while she was working in the field. Now you have to be a good-looking woman to look good in work clothes. Am I missing something here? Naomi didn't miss it. From way off, I think she saw the gleam in Boaz's eyes, and she used all her worldly skill and gangs up with Ruth to show Ruth how to catch a husband. You can read the story in chapter 3. She says to Ruth, go wash up, anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and I'm going to tell you how to catch Boaz. And Ruth, ever the faithful daughter, does exactly what she's told to do. She tells her to wait until Boaz has had too much to drink and then go into his tent and uncover his feet. Now you're grown people and I ought to be able to tell you what that means, but I'm not sure I have enough courage. I'm just going to tell you that when Boaz woke up and discovered his feet had been uncovered, covered, he proposed marriage. Because feet is a euphemism for the male sexual genitals. Now, you didn't die, did you? What a book! Now, the first chapter was filled with tragedy. 3 funerals, Elimelech dies, Mahlon drops dead in the field, Chilion dies on the threshing floor, Naomi is left without her 2 sons or her husband, and she begins to speak tragedy as if her name is no longer pleasant. Naomi means pleasant, but her name is now Mara, which means bitter. Nothing prepares a woman for this. Nothing. I once lived in a community where there was a woman who somehow felt called that it was her vocation that when anybody in the church died, it was her job to call everybody and tell them all the details about the death. She actually was known in our community as the death angel. I don't think anybody ever said that to her face. I didn't even say that, and I'll say almost anything. But she would call and let you know that people had died. If she were doing that today, we all had our cell phones. When we saw her number, we wouldn't answer it because we just thought it was a little bit strange. But she had this thing that she would say, George died today. You know there'll be 2 more before the week is out because death always comes in 3s. I think that's the only woman that's ever scared me. You know, I mean, I was scared to go and visit her. She really spooked me out. Hemingway said it better. The world breaks everyone. Then some become strong in the broken places. If I have a list of 1,000 favorite quotes, this is in my top 10. The world breaks everyone, and then some become strong in the broken places, like Naomi and Ruth. And so Ruth sticks to Naomi like Velcro. She puts her future in the hands of this unlikely saint. She sews her heart to the heart of Naomi, the ties that bind. With almost nothing to go on, Ruth decides to go on. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Never doubt a woman's intuition. It flows from the throne of grace. With the world dishing up tragedy and famine, Ruth goes with the Lord and with hope. Now, you may rush to the ending of this book and say that the real hero of the story is a man named Boaz. But Boaz is a secondary actor, an almost accidental husband, a man who couldn't outsmart 2 women. The lead actors are Naomi and Ruth. And I'm going to make myself a one-person saints selection committee and nominate Naomi and Ruth to be in the calendar. Saint Naomi and Saint Ruth. Because we too frequently in the history of the church have ignored the women. You can read the Bible, and it almost never really gives enough credit to the women who were saints. In Hebrews 11, that great chapter of the Hall of Faith, it lists only Rahab of Jericho and some vague reference to women who received their dead by resurrection. All the rest are men. But in this story, the drama centers on 2 women. We ought not be leaving women out of the drama of salvation. It ought not to be happening. The Gospels are filled with women named Mary. From the one that matters the most, Mary, the mother of Jesus, to Mary of Magdala, the first preacher of the resurrection, who, as far as I am concerned, was the first pope. How odd that women have been so ignored, mistreated, abused, and delegated to a secondary, submissive role all these centuries, and often with the blessings of the men who control the hierarchy of the church. I don't know about you, but I think it's way past time that we get this changed. Naomi and Ruth, saints. It doesn't seem like much what they do. They get a husband. Poor Boaz never saw it coming. He didn't know what hit him. It's not pious. It sounds strange, but it leads to marriage, and it leads to a baby. And from that baby would come a king called David, and from David's line would come a Savior named Jesus. Somehow, saints turn out to be the people who do what has to be done with some creativity, ingenuity, and a little bit of sexiness. I like it. Remember that Boaz first noticed Ruth in the field harvesting the crop. Now do we get it? We may not look like much. We may not have much. We may not seem like much. We may not seem to be doing much. We may not even think we are much. We may be full of doubts and insecurity. We may appear weak and not so smart. We may be poor and afflicted with hardships. We may not be remembered in the history books. But chances are, we are one of God's saints guarding the world even when no one knows. We are standing at our post against the beast kings, the dark side, the evil ones who would rule us with fear and violence. It's the vocation of this church to produce more saints. So when you ask me, preacher, why did you need to remember the saints? I'm telling you, we must remember the saints because from this group of saints, God is going to produce some more saints. And they're going to stand against the beast kings. You bet your life we remember the saints. And God willing, some of you are going to be known as saints in the ages to come. I will be looking forward to those of you who are so honored and so named and so remembered after I have been resurrected and I am in the home not made with hands, but by the living God who calls us all to sainthood. Now I should be finished, but I'm not. I'm too tired to preach by myself anymore. So I want you to help me finish this sermon. Your sermon manuscript is in your bulletin on this gold-looking paper. This is the litany of all saints. When you looked at this morning and your first words were, oh my God, this is long, you are forgiven. So let us preach together the conclusion of this sermon. Let us go forth in peace. Let us sing. Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Rachel and Leah, makers of the covenant, forebears of our race. Elizabeth and Simeon, Joseph, Monica and Helen, exemplars in the love and care of children. John the Baptizer, map maker of the Lord's coming. Thomas the Doubter, Augustine of Canterbury, Francis Xavier, all travelers who carried the gospel to distant places. Bernard and Dominic, Catherine of Siena, the scourge of popes, John and Charles Wesley, preachers in the streets, all whose power of speaking gave life to the written word. Benedict of Nursia, Teresa of Avila, Nicholas Farrar, Elizabeth Ann Seton, Richard Moe Benson, Francis Joseph Godet, all founders of communities. Francis who kissed the leper, Florence Nightingale, Albert Schweitzer, all who brought to the sick and suffering the hands of healing. Stand here beside us. Zacchaeus, the tree climber, Moses the Black and John Christensen, Desert Fathers, Brother Lawrence, Teresa Blessou, the Little Flower, all cultivators of holy simplicity. Stand here beside us. glorious company of heaven, all climbers of the ladder of paradise, all runners of the celestial race. Now would you please add to our list the names of loved ones known to all or maybe known only to you. You may say this in your own mind. You may turn and say it to someone next to you. You may say it out loud. For example, I will say Jeff Davis Kennedy and Rita Kennedy.
Erase